Good evening. Hope everybody's had a good day, or at least a decent one. So we're going to continue. We'll be in Matthew chapter 5. Continue the Sermon on the Mount, which is chapters 5, 6, and 7. You know, as I prepared, we'll start at verse 21. And as I prepared for this, I remembered, most of you probably like me. Now, I'm sure your boys weren't. When I was in school, I learned the times tables so that you'd look at a problem and go, boom, this is the answer. Boom, this is the answer. And you could even use it to do division. A couple of years ago, I worked as in an after-school tutoring program. I mostly worked with third graders. And I got their math, and I'd look at the problem, and I'd think, well, this is the answer. They had to take, and if it was 3 times 10, well, they'd draw 3 circles and put 10 dots in each circle, and then they'd have to count them. I thought, that's a waste of time. That is just plain foolishness. And I wanted to tell those third graders, I actually wanted to tell the teachers or whoever said that's how they had to do math, essentially what we're going to see Jesus telling the people today. This may be how you were taught, but let me teach you a better way. So, with that said, we closed up last time, verse 20. Jesus kind of poking fun at the Pharisees. They thought, well, we're it. We're above everybody else. We know better. We're high and mighty. And he was basically saying, no, you're not. And because they were the ones that were teaching the Jewish people, teaching them wrong. But the Jewish people, most of them couldn't read, couldn't write. So what they knew about the scriptures is only what they would have read to them or taught to them. And tonight, so we're begin Matthew 5, verse 21, and we're going to learn as Jesus is teaching about life, various topics. You'll see that through, going into chapter 6, I do believe, yes. And, of course, he's teaching a large crowd. It's known as the Sermon on the Mount because it starts off, he sat down on the side of the mountain. And so let's pick up verse 21, and the first topic is concerning murder. Concerning murder. He says in verse 21, you have heard that the ancients were told. Now, ancients, their ancestors, they've been told for a long time or taught for a long time, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you, Jesus says, everyone who's angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. Whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, or raka, depending upon your translation, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court, and whoever says you fool shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. So the teachings of the ancients, what the Pharisees have taught, all the rules and regulations that they've had for many years teaching the Jewish people, of course they say do not commit murder, which is the 6th of the 10 commandments. But what they taught was the basic, that if you commit that act of murder, that's what's wrong, nothing else. Now that may not sound bad, but what Jesus is teaching is he's saying that if you're angry with someone else, you're going to be guilty before the court. Guilty. Now, we know who the ultimate judge is, right? The ultimate courtroom is, it's God and his courtroom, because everybody's going to be judged before him. Jesus says if you call somebody a good for nothing, or raka, I said depends upon your translation, you're calling somebody, now this is the S word when my children were growing up, stupid, or empty-headed, vain. It's essentially where somebody's bullying somebody else by calling them names. To call somebody a fool, they're in danger of going to hell. Now, nobody is physically hurt by name calling. We all probably know the old saying, sticks and stones may break our bones, but names will never hurt us. Names hurt. Names hurt. They've taken on a new dimension in our social media age where they're bullying with words. It may be verbally, it may be through a text message, it may be on some social media site. Kids are getting bullied, and we've all heard them in the news, to the point where they get so depressed the child takes their own life. And so this is what Jesus is kind of hinting at, not 2020, but if you start calling people names, it's your inner heart attitude is what he's talking about. And it becomes verbal abuse. My thing's over here making noises. Jesus is saying it's your one's internal attitude that the law prohibits. Therefore, an abusive insult carries the same kind of moral guilt as the physical act of murder. Now, we might say, wait a minute, there's a difference, right? You know, one, you actually take a life. Another, well, you just call them a bunch of names. But it's the internal heart attitude, because I'm no psychologist, no sociologist, but usually before somebody commits an act like murder, it began here. And you begin here, you're going to start talking it. And so that's Jesus' point. It's what's your heart attitude? If you're willing to call somebody a fool, then you're willing to commit murder, and you're guilty before God, one as the other. Then he goes into concerning reconciliation. So it kind of follows this one of concerning murder. Verse 23. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar. Go first, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. So if you're there now in the Jewish day, or in Jesus' day, the Jews, let's just say, if they accidentally sinned, there was no offering for intentional, but if you accidentally sin, you're cutting down a tree, the axe head flies off and strikes somebody and kills them. That's accident. You're to take and go to the priest with an offering. It might be a goat, a lamb, a bird, as a sin offering to say, I want God to forgive me, to be pleased with me again. And so what Jesus said, if you go there and you bring an offering, and then all of a sudden you remember, my brother Jesse's got something against me. I need to go make it right. Don't carry through the offering. Make it right. Reconcile. This is what Jesus' point is in that section. He says, don't wait. Go. But then he kind of takes it a little bit further there in verse 25. He says, make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you are with him on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over to the judge the officer, and the officer will throw you into prison. Truly I say to you, you will not come out of there until you've paid the last cent. In other words, you're going to be thrown into debtor's prison because, you didn't make friends or reconcile with the person who had something against you. The key, you might say here, is to love, or love is the key. We're to love one another, not, if somebody's got something against you. Now, you might also say, and I've asked this question in reading text, about if I remember somebody's got something against me, what if I don't remember? What if I don't know somebody? What if I don't know Jesse's mad at me, and I don't know he's mad at me? Well, if you know he's mad at me, come tell me. Because I see a lot of that in churches and in the world today. A knows that B is mad at C, but A doesn't want to tell C. I don't want to get involved. But they'd rather see those two, or one be mad at the other and the other scratching their head wanting to know, trying to figure out what's going on. Love one another is Jesus' point, and reconcile one another. In 2 Corinthians 5, 18 and 19, Paul says, are giving the ministry of reconciliation. He says, now all these things are from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. namely that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses, sins against them, and he has committed to us the word of reconciliation. Once we sin, we're separated from God, we're an enemy of God. Somebody has to reconcile, make right us with God. Well, that's what Jesus did. He made us right with God again. Well, once we're saved, that's part of our duty, is to reconcile others who are separated from God back to God. Well, if you know somebody who's mad at somebody else, bring them together and get them reconciled. That's part of our ministry as well. So then we see verse 27 concerning, this is one that some people want to skip over, adultery. He's talking about adultery. Because in our world today, it doesn't matter, right? Verse 27, you've heard, Jesus says, that it was said, you've been taught, you shall not commit adultery. Again, that's another one of the 10 Commandments. But I, Jesus, I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out, throw it away from you. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Your right hand, if it makes you stumble, cut it off. Throw it from you. For it's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. So do not commit adultery, commandment number 7 of the 10. And the Pharisees limited this to the actual act of committing adultery. Remember where the Jewish leaders brought the woman caught in adultery before Jesus? Law was, if someone's caught in adultery, they were to be stoned to death, put to death, and stoning was how Jews put it. The question that's always been brought up to me is, where's the man? You can't commit adultery by yourself. They didn't bring him because he set her up. And so the Pharisees, Jewish leaders, they simply were saying, you've got to be caught in the act. So if you're not caught, it's okay. But Jesus says, if you look at a woman with lust, it's adultery. Now, I've had it explained to me like this. Gentlemen, we're walking down the street, you see a beautiful young lady, you'd look. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is when you take that second look. Because why are you looking again? Unless she fell down, you're looking back for something like that. It's when you take that second look. Because then you're, ooh. Now, I'm going to add this part. It's not in Scripture, so this is from me. And this has to do with the way a lot of, especially our young women, dress today. Because, you can go back to the 60s, and they had the mini skirts and the low-cut blouses, and nowadays it seems like the clothes are so skin tight they were painted on. And what it is, instead of, I guess they want to look attractive. The problem is they're looking too attractive. And what Jesus is talking about here is essentially, it's what's in the mind. The man, it's okay to look, but when you take that second look, it's in your mind. Why are you taking that second look? Well, ladies are going out and they are drawing attention to, not themselves, but to their bodies. Men, and there are men out there who have problems, who are look at her, and then she looks at him, and oh, she wants me. And that's where she ends up in trouble, or worse. That's my 2 cents, no charge for all that. Problem is, society says it's okay for ladies to dress that way. Because all you got to do, I know I've got 5 granddaughters. To try and find a decent outfit for church, it's getting hard. The older they get, the harder it is. Because, I've seen them where you can't buy, we've gone in stores looking for just a pair of shorts. That are shorts, not cut how high. Jesus is emphasizing here that, again, it is a heart condition. It's not the act, that matters with God. It's the heart. Now, pluck out your eye and cut off your hand. Is he being literal? No. If Jesus is known for hyperboles, over-exaggerating to make a point. So what is Jesus' point here? It's simple. Don't sin. Stop sinning. You're better off to pluck out your eye, cut off your hand, than to sin continuously and be hell-bound. If you're guys, you looking at women, you're looking again, looking a third time, stop it. That's his point. Stop the sinning. Because committing adultery, it's not somebody wakes up one day and says, hey, I think I'm going to go commit adultery. It begins up here with the thought process. One winks at another or just a glance, and one thing leads to another. It might happen in a matter of days. It may happen over years. Stop is Jesus' point, because you are better off to cut off body parts than to end up separating yourself from God forever. Then you think adultery could be a hot topic? Well, the next one is concerning divorce. Verse number 31. It was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I, Jesus, I say to you, everyone who divorces his wife except for the reason of unchastity or sexual immorality makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. There's another part in the Gospels where Jesus is questioned. And they say, Moses gave us the right to divorce. And Jesus' response, and I'm going to paraphrase, is because you nagged him into doing it. He says divorce for any reason other than sexual immorality is wrong. Why is it wrong? We'll go to Matthew 19, verse 3 through 6. Again, Pharisees came to Jesus, testing him, asking him, is it lawful for a man to divorce a wife for any reason at all? Now, according to law that the Jews had, it was. In fact, all a man had to do, from what I've been taught, all he had to do was write down, I divorced my wife, whatever her name is, go out in public and 3 times say, I divorce her, I divorce her, I divorce her. They're divorced. Couldn't get any cheaper than that. But here, verse 4, he says, he answered and said, Jesus answered, can you divorce for any reason? He says, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And he said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. They're no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. Marriage is intended by God to be till death do you part. Nobody ever said marriage was going to be easy. But unfortunately, we have couples today, well, God's not the center of that marriage. They go out on these venues, they pay thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, they bring in musicians and they do all this. They don't get married in church anymore. They have ministers, or most of them I think have got justice of the peace. And so God's not even in it. At least not as far as I'm concerned. And then it's, well, I'm tired of you, you're tired of me, you go your way and I'll go mine. There's nothing. There's no consideration about what they were supposed to have done. Unite in marriage, two becoming one. Now, the sexual immorality, chastity. The Greek word is porneia for sexual immorality. You know what English word we get from that Greek word? Porn. So the immorality equals things such as adultery, homosexuality, bestiality, transsexuality. It's anything that would break the bond of marriage. So it's not just one act. It carries on a little bit broader sense than that. Jesus says anybody who divorces for any reason other than that will cause the parties that remarry to commit adultery, because God intended marriage to be between a man and a woman forever. Period. End of discussion. Next section. Concerning the taking of oaths. Taking an oath, swearing. Verse 33, he says, again, you have heard. The ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, Jesus says, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond these is of evil. The Pharisees taught people were not to make oaths. In other words, don't perjure yourself. Well, that's, true. And oaths that were made in the name of the Lord were binding oaths. Oaths. Our own court of law. I don't know if not all of them do this anymore, but if you were a witness and you're sitting on a witness stand, you're sworn in. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God. A lot of them have taken out that last part. But see, they're taking that oath by the name of God. And so this is what Jesus is saying. Don't take an oath by the name of God or by earth or by anything. His point, and well, those oaths then, as well as in a court of law, were binding. So, and people evidently, oh, Brother Bob, by Jerusalem, by my mama's grave, by God, I swear I'm going to do this. And they don't do it. They were just making an oath to make it sound good, but they had no intentions of keeping what they said they would do. And so Jesus' point is, if you're going to make one, take it seriously. People are to know that if you say yes, you mean yes. If you say no, you mean no. It's not to be yes, maybe, no, maybe, because they just, you've known people, they'll tell you yes to one question, they'll tell you no to the same one. That's kind of double tongue or talking out of both sides of your mouth. It needs to be that, well, Jesse said no, Jesse means no. Or whoever, whatever they say. They said yes, yeah, then they mean yes. They said they're going to do it. We know they're going to do it. They said they're not going to. They're not going to do it. That was Jesus' point. To be serious about what you say, and people will know, K-N-O-W, that your no is a no and your yes is a yes. And then verse 38 through 42 is concerning resisting, not arrest, although maybe we could add that in here today. Verse 38. He says, you've heard, it said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on the right, turn, let them slap you on the left. If they want to take your shirt, give them your coat. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Now the Pharisees taught eye for an eye. This is the law of retaliation, lex talionis in Latin. And they're taking it for anything, the teachers of the Jews. But Jesus is speaking about not resisting an evil person. He's talking about concerning personal relationships. Personal relationships. He's not talking about criminal acts. He's not talking about acts of war. He's saying if somebody slaps you, Well, they'll slap you on the other cheek. If they want to sue you, now they wouldn't sue for our shirt nowadays, but some people, that was all they had, a shirt and a coat. They sue for your shirt, give them your coat as well. And here's the one that really drives it home that I can explain a little bit better. If you're forced to go 1 mile, I think it's probably a stadia, which would have been the distance measurement that they used in Jesus' day, go a second. Now, a Roman soldier had the right, by law, to make anybody carry their packs one equivalent a mile. So Jesus is saying, go 2 miles. But now Jesus is talking to Jews. The Jewish people hated the Romans because they were their occupiers. They didn't want to do anything that they wanted to do. But they had to, by law, carry that pack, the 1 mile, or that one distance. Young children were taught how many steps were in a mile, how far. They could look and say, boom, that's the distance, and that's where I stop. And they would carry that pack. They'd be gritting their teeth the whole way, and they get to that end, and they drop it down. So I've done my duty. So Jesus is saying, go another one. All of these that he's talking about here, it's not about self. It's about the other person. Show them the love of God. Show them love, show them mercy, show them grace. Be salt and light. Don't resist them. Because if you resist, they're never going to see salt and light. They're never going to want to hear the truth. But if you show them a little grace, you show them salt and light, they're going to say, wow, he carried it twice as far as he had to. Must be something different about this guy. That's the point that Jesus is making here. And the last section, as time marches on, is concerning love, 43 through 48. He says, you've heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who's in heaven. For he causes his S-U-N sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, then what reward do you have? Even the tax collectors, which were considered the lowest of the low, even the tax collectors do the same. If you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Don't even the Gentiles do the same? Therefore, you are to be perfect, maturing, as your heavenly Father is perfect, totally mature. Now, love your neighbor goes back into Leviticus 19:18. You're to love your neighbor. But the religious leaders added, hate your enemies. That's not in the scriptures. And so Jesus is saying, no, you are to love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. Again, he's flipping the tables. It's not about what you can get out of it. It's how you can help them. He says his reasoning is, if you do that, then you show yourself to be a son of God. And God, it rains and the sun rises on the good and the bad, the righteous and the unrighteous. He says, it's easy to love those that love you. But love those that don't love you. Pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies. It is easy to love those who love us most of the time. It's the ones that don't love you is where it really gets sticky. As Christians, we're to be the salt and light. We're to be like Christ. We're to be different from others, including being different than, in that day, the Gentiles who worship multiple gods and could care less about somebody else. We're to be maturing as God is totally perfect or mature. We're to be like Christ. We're to be a reflection of him in all that we do. We're to love one another as Jesus says, I have loved you, John 13:34. If we love one another as Jesus has loved us, then they'll know we are Christians by how we act. So we have to consider how Jesus has loved us. So let me close it up this way. How has Jesus loved us? That's a question to you. How has Jesus loved us?
He died for us.
He died for us. Do we deserve him dying for us? What do we deserve? Separation from God forever and cast into eternal hell. But God sent his only son out of love. Not out of, pity, but out of love. So that we could be with him one day. So if Jesus has loved us that much and loved us in that manner, how should we love other people? If he showed us mercy and grace, shouldn't we show others mercy and grace? I've known a few in my day, unlovable people. You ever stop and think what makes them so unlovable? Maybe they've had something happen in their lives. Maybe they lost a loved one. What was the story I read this morning, my devotion time? Don't you love it when God gives you something, but he only gives you just a little bit? The story was something along the line of a missionary met another man. I think they were building a construction, and he noticed that this man had been watching, so he comes over to him and he says, you believe in God? He says, used to. I stopped. He says, why? He says, well, my wife and I tried for years to have a child. And we finally had a child. And then that child died. And I locked myself in my room for 3 days and fasted and prayed and asked God why. I didn't get an answer. I stopped believing in God. Tear formed on that missionary's face. Him and his wife had lost like 3 children to miscarriage. They had one that was born and died. He says, well, God heard your prayer. And he just shared with him what he'd been through. You know, we don't know why people get bitter, why they get mad at God. Sometimes we have to ask. Sometimes we just have to imagine in our head, well, maybe it's this reason, maybe it's that reason. And people can become hateful, bitter, for some very simple life reasons. Why should we show them mercy and grace? God showed us mercy and grace. Some people just need an ear to listen to, somebody to love on them, maybe just for a moment. Anybody have any questions or concerns about what I just said? During that study, we'll move into chapter 6 next week. I heard